Welcome back to Math 103. This is video number 9 on fair distribution. In order to place Faith's markers, we work with the fact that Faith considers the entire collection of stuff, the entire array of fruit, to be worth 8 Faith points. So we worked out earlier that 2 Faith points is a minimum fair share amount, which means that she's going to mark off 4 different 2 points shares. 4 different shares that are minimum fair shares for her. So we start at the left edge and scan from left to right until we notice, aha, right here we've got 2 Faith points. Our convention is that as soon as we see the opportunity to place a Faith marker, we're going to do so. That makes this orange together with that pear Faith's first minimum fair share. It's true that if we included this apple is worthless to Faith. Orange, pear, apple would also have been 2 Faith points worth, but our convention is going to be that the first moment that we can place a Faith marker, which is right after this pear, as soon as we have put together what counts as a fair share for her, we're going to place the marker right away. Alright, so Faith's first marker gets placed here. We continue to scan from F1 forward until we see another 2 Faith points. Aha! Right there. After this orange, we get to place another Faith marker, which means that this apple, orange, orange, altogether constitutes Faith's second minimum fair share. We continue in this way, scanning forward, from left to right until we arrive at 2 Faith points worth, and that's after this pear, and that's all. Okay, we have placed 3 markers, and we have marked off 1, 2, 3, 4 shares, each of which has 2 Faith points. Next we place Greg's markers, and I recommend pausing the video here and seeing if you can place them yourself first. Greg values the entire array of goods at 16 Greg points, and as we worked out earlier, that comes out to 4 Greg points per minimum fair share. We follow the same approach, scanning left to right until we see 4 Greg points appear. Aha! After this apple is where we first have the opportunity to place a Greg marker. Okay, so Greg's first marker appears in the same location as Ed's first marker, and that's perfectly okay. That's not a problem. All right, so OPA is Ed's first minimum fair share that he's marked off. It's also Greg's first minimum share that he's marked off. We continue scanning left to right and find that the next time we have 4 Greg points accumulated. So from G1 scanning forward, we arrive at another Greg marker here in the same location as where Faith placed her second marker. Great, so this orange is Greg's second minimum fair share. We continue scanning forward left to right until we have 4 Greg points. That occurs right here. And we place Greg's third marker. Alright, so we have marked off 4 fair shares for Greg. Finally, we place Hannah's markers. Again, I recommend pausing the video here and seeing if you can do this yourself first. Hannah values the entire array at 10 Hannah points. A quarter of that is 2.5 Hannah points. So we scan from left to right until we see a total of 2.5 Hannah points accumulate. That occurs right here in the same location where we've witnessed Ed and Greg place their first markers. So Hannah also places her first marker in that same location. Continuing to scan left to right from that spot, we discover that the next point where 2.5 Hannah points have accumulated is right here, after orange, orange, apple, pear. Okay, that becomes her second marker, the location of her second marker. So orange, orange, apple, pear is her second minimum fair share. We continue scanning left to right and find that the location of her third marker is the same as it was for Greg and Ed. Very well, then we have placed all the markers. Hannah has marked off 1, 2, 3, 4 minimum fair shares. We've completed the placement of markers, but I'd like to comment on a few common student mistakes. One common mistake is to think that you need 4 markers for each player, when in fact you really need only 3. A good way to think about this is that if you have 4 houses on a block, 4 plots that are right next to one another, then you only need 3 fences to keep them separate. Right? The left end of the street already demarcates a property. You don't have to build a fence there just for the purpose of demarcating the end of the property. And similarly, the right end of the block, that demarcates the end of a property. You don't need a fence just for that purpose. So the only fences you need are between houses, and if there are 4 of those houses, you only need 3 fences. That's why each player needs only 3 markers. If there were 5 players, each one would need 4 markers. If there were 10 players, each one would need 9 markers. However many players there are, one less than that is the number of markers that each player needs to place. Another caution in the same spirit, and this is a common error, is that there is never a reason to place a marker at the right end or the left end of the list of items. That doesn't serve any purpose because it doesn't separate items from other items. So you never place a marker at the right end or at the left end either. So in practice, you would imagine all the players going through and placing their markers more or less at the same time. We've done it one player at a time just because it's easier to think about it that way. But in practice, they're all doing this more or less simultaneously. One last comment here is that there is a way at the end of the process to look back to see if you've done your work correctly, and that is by looking at the last share that you mark off. If you've gone through looking from left to right, scanning from left to right, and placing a marker, scanning left to right and placing a marker, scanning left to right and placing a marker, then at the end of this process, whatever is in between the third marker, the last marker, and the right edge of the table, that should work out on its own to be a minimum fair share also. So let's look at this for Ed. So Ed marks off share 1 for him, a second share for him, a third share for him, and then he doesn't place a marker to mark off the last share. Whatever's after his third marker is his last share, and sure enough, 1, 2, 3, that is indeed the right number of Ed points to count as a whole minimum fair share. Right? So he places 3 markers, and if he's placed them correctly, the last share is indeed a correct amount for a minimum fair share. Before going on to the next video, check that the same thing is true for Faith, Greg, and Hannah, that everything from F3 to the end is a fair share for Faith, that everything from G3 to the end really is the right amount to be a fair share for Greg, and everything from H3 to the end is also the right number of Hannah points to be a fair share for Hannah.